During the harvest festival, my daughter grabbed the microphone in front of 50 guests and said, "Choose my husband or you will never see your grandchildren again." 50 people standing between the vine rows, wine glasses frozen midair, and Derek, her husband, he was standing behind her, arms crossed, smiling like a man who had already won. I set down my glass. I did not say a single word. I just walked away. They had no idea what was coming. Thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments so we can connect across places and stories. Also, please note some details are shaped for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance may be coincidental, but the message is something worth thinking about for yourself. 6 hours before my daughter tried to tear my life apart, the fog was still clinging to the vineyard like a second skin. I woke at 5:30, same as always, and reached for the nightstand. Not for my phone, for the ring. It sat in a small wooden box lined with faded velvet. A gold signet ring with the Prescott family crest etched into the face. A grapevine curling around the letter P. My grandfather had worn it. My father had worn it. I had worn it for 30 years before I placed it in that box the day Eleanor passed. 3 years gone, and I still reached for her side of the bed some mornings. She had a habit of leaving books face down on every flat surface, cracking the spines in a way that made me wince. Now I would give anything to trip over one of her paperbacks again. The ring was meant for Ethan, my grandson, 8 years old and already asking about soil composition like a tiny scientist in muddy sneakers. I would give it to him when he was old enough to understand what family meant. I padded downstairs, bare feet on cold stone Eleanor had picked out 25 years ago, and started the coffee. My favorite mug read, "World's okayest winemaker. A gift from Frank Moretti, my vineyard manager." I poured it black. No sugar. Eleanor used to say I drank it like I was punishing myself. Maybe I was. By 6, I was outside walking the rows. The fog was lifting, pulling apart in white ribbons between the vines. Prescott Vineyards sat on 80 acres of rolling hillside east of Charlottesville, the Blue Ridge a dark, jagged line against a sky turning the color of a bruised peach. 3 generations of Prescotts had worked this soil. My grandfather planted the first vines in 1952. My father added the Cabernet Franc and the Viognier, built the stone cellar, where the barrels aged in cool darkness, and I had spent 42 years keeping it alive, pouring my back and my knees and my stubborn refusal to quit into every harvest, every bottle that left this property with the Prescott name on the label. I heard boots on gravel. Frank Moretti coming up the hill. 72 years old, and still moving like a man who had never heard of retirement. Canvas work pants, faded flannel. A hat so sun-bleached it had lost any claim to its original color. 35 years he had been with me. Knew every vine by heart. "You look like hell," he said. "Good to see you too, Frank." He squinted at the eastern slope. "Fog is lifting early." "Good day for it." "Good day," I agreed, though something in my chest felt tight in a way I could not explain. The Harvest Festival was our biggest event. 50 guests, long tables beneath the old oak tree, white tablecloths, string lights, bottles of Prescott wine poured freely. Eleanor had started it 15 years ago. Said every vineyard needed a day when the community could celebrate the land. I kept the tradition because stopping it would have felt like losing another piece of her. By 8, the tables were set, the string lights tested, the wine station organized. I was adjusting a tablecloth when I heard tires on gravel. Too early. The festival did not start until noon. Caroline's silver SUV pulled into the driveway. My older daughter, 37 years old. She stepped out first, sunglasses covering half her face even though the sun was barely up. Then, Derek, her husband, 2 years married. 18 months since he had walked into Prescott Vineyards with a title I still did not understand. Financial consultant. Caroline said he would modernize our operations, bring new distribution channels. I had said I had been running this vineyard for 42 years without a financial consultant, and the vines were doing just fine. But I signed the papers anyway. Because she asked. Because she was my daughter. Because Eleanor was not there to tell me to slow down and read every line twice. Derek stepped out wearing a linen blazer that probably cost more than Frank's monthly salary. He lifted his hand to wave, and that is when I saw it. The ring. The Prescott signet ring. Gold, catching the morning light, on Derek's right hand, like it belonged there. My stomach dropped. I must have left the box out yesterday when Sophie came by. Must have forgotten to lock the dresser. And now Derek was wearing my grandfather's ring, the ring meant for Ethan, like it was something he had picked up at a weekend market. "Morning, James," Derek called, grinning wide. I did not answer. I watched Caroline avoid my eyes. Watched the way she touched his elbow, steering him, and I felt something cold settle into my chest like fog rolling into a valley. "We wanted to get here early," Caroline said. Her voice was too bright. "Help set up." "I have got it handled," I said. "We insist," Derek said, and brushed past me into the yard. Caroline lingered for half a second, opened her mouth, closed it, followed him. I stood there in the driveway, morning sun on my shoulders, the smell of ripe grapes and wet earth all around me, and felt the first prickle of something I could not name yet. Something wrong. Very wrong. By 11, the yard was full. George Hadley showed up first, same as always. 68 years old with a handshake that could crush walnuts, carrying a six-pack of local lager under one arm, and a grin that said he had no plans to leave before dark. We had been friends since before my beard went gray. 40 years of Sunday dinners. 40 years of him telling me I was too stubborn for my own good. "You look like hell," he said, clapping my shoulder. "That is the second time I have heard that today. Then maybe start listening." Maria Conti arrived next, 58 years old. All warm laughter and wild hand gestures, carrying a tray of bruschetta she had made at 4 in the morning because Maria Conti did not believe in store-bought anything. She owned Conti's, the Italian restaurant on the downtown mall in Charlottesville, and she had been serving Prescott Viognier for 25 years. "Jimmy," she called across the yard, her voice carrying like a church bell. "This Viognier is the best you have ever made. I am telling everyone." Then Sophie pulled up in her old Honda. My younger daughter, 32 years old. Quiet and steady, in a way that reminded me so much of Eleanor, it made my chest ache. She stepped out carrying a pie, smiling that soft, careful smile, and behind her Ethan exploded from the back seat like a bottle rocket. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" He sprinted across the lawn, gap-toothed and sunburned, wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon grape cluster on it. I barely had time to brace before he hit me like a freight train, arms wrapping around my waist. "Mom said you are making the special wine today." I laughed, scooping him up even though my back screamed. "That is right, buddy. The late harvest. Best wine in Albemarle County. Can I help?" "You bet." He wriggled down and grabbed my hand, dragging me toward the vine rows. Sophie followed, set the pie on the table, then glanced over at Caroline and Derek, standing by the old oak tree, heads bent close, whispering. Her smile faded. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Fine," I lied. For a while I let myself believe it. The afternoon stretched out golden and slow. Arthur and cheese on the long tables, wine glasses catching the light, laughter rising and falling like birdsong. Frank stood guard near the wine station, pouring generous glasses and answering questions about barrel aging with the patience of a man who had given the same answers 1,000 times. Ethan sat on my lap eating bruschetta and asking why grapes changed colors. I told him about anthocyanins, and he repeated the word 3 times, delighted by the way it felt in his mouth. Then Caroline stood up. She was near the oak tree where we had hung the rope swing Ethan loved. She picked up her wine glass, white wine, something expensive Derek had brought, and tapped it with a fork. Once, twice. The sharp ring cut through the noise like a blade. Conversations died. Heads turned. Can I have everyone's attention, please? Her voice was too loud, too bright. The kind of bright that comes from nerves, not joy. I set Ethan down gently and wiped my hands on my apron, feeling that cold thing from this morning settle back into my chest. I want to take a moment to talk about my father. A few people clapped politely. I saw George frown, his beer halfway to his lips. My dad has always been a strong personality. He built this vineyard into what it is today. 42 years of hard work. She paused. Derek stepped forward behind her, arms crossed, that same cold smile. But sometimes, strong personalities can be difficult. The applause stopped. People glanced at each other. Caroline. I started. She talked over me. Dad, I need you to do something. For all of us. She gestured at Derek. I need you to accept my husband as the leader of this vineyard. Publicly. Right now. Or, she stopped. Swallowed hard. Or you are no longer welcome in this family. And Ethan. Her voice cracked. Ethan will not be seeing his grandfather anymore. Silence. I could hear a mockingbird singing somewhere in the vineyard, bright and oblivious. I could hear Ethan behind me starting to whimper. And while we are being honest, Derek stepped forward, smooth and measured. You should know that the estate planning document you signed 6 months ago transferred 55% ownership of Prescott Vineyards to Caroline. It is legal. It is done. The world tilted. I stared at Caroline. You told me that was just paperwork. You said it was so you could make small decisions when I was not around. She would not meet my eyes. Dad, you were tired. You kept saying you wanted to slow down. You lied to me. I did not. She stopped, tears running. I thought I was helping. The word tasted like ash. Sophie. Emily said quietly, standing up. This is not the time. Stay out of this, Sophie. Caroline snapped. I felt 30 pairs of eyes on me. George had set down his beer. Maria had her hand over her mouth. Frank stood rigid by the wine station, jaw locked. And Ethan, my Ethan, was crying. Soft, confused hiccups like he did not understand what was happening but knew it was bad. Then Derek smiled. The same smile from this morning. Cold. Satisfied. And I realized this was planned. All of it. The wine glass. The speech. The audience. I looked at my daughter one last time. Then I pulled off my apron. Folded it carefully. Set it on the table next to Sophie's pie. I walked past Caroline, past Derek, past 50 guests who parted like water, past the oak tree and the rope swing and the string lights and all the things I had set up to make this day good. I did not say a word. I got in my truck, started the engine, and backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw Caroline standing in the middle of the vineyard. One hand reaching out like she could pull me back. Her face a mess of tears and ruined makeup. And for a second she looked like the little girl who used to sit on my shoulders between the vine rows, asking why grapes had 5 pointed leaves. Then I turned the corner and she was gone. I do not remember deciding to drive to George's house. Do not remember the 25 minutes on Route 29, the turns I must have made, the stop signs I must have obeyed or ignored. One moment I was backing out of my own driveway, with my daughter's silhouette shrinking in the mirror. And the next I was standing on George Hadley's porch at the end of a dirt road outside Crozet, my hand raised to knock, the afternoon sun slanting low and golden through the hickory trees. His house sat on 30 acres of cattle pasture, a modest ranch style with a wraparound porch and a screen door that had needed replacing since the Clinton administration. I had been coming here for 40 years, watched football games on his sagging leather couch, helped him re-roof the barn after the ice storm of 2009, knew which floorboards creaked and where he kept the whiskey. The door opened before I could knock. George stood there in his weekend uniform, jeans faded nearly white, a University of Virginia t-shirt with a hole near the collar, bare feet. He looked at me for a long moment, taking in whatever he saw on my face, and then stepped aside. "Come on in, Jim. No question. No surprise." Just those 4 words and the steady weight of his hand on my shoulder as I walked past him into the dim living room that smelled like old wood, lemon polish, and the faint ghost of the pipe tobacco he had quit smoking 12 years ago, but still kept in a jar on the mantel. George disappeared into the kitchen. I heard glass clinking, the quiet glug of liquid. He came back with 2 tumblers of whiskey, neat, no ice, and handed me one without ceremony. "Thanks," I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. He sat in the armchair across from me, the one with duct tape holding the left armrest together, took a sip, and waited. So I told him. All of it. The festival, Caroline's speech, the ultimatum, Derek's announcement about the 55%, the estate planning document I had signed 6 months ago, thinking I was just giving my daughter authority to handle small decisions because she had asked so sweetly, and I had been tired. And she was my daughter, and Eleanor was not there to tell me to read the fine print. The ring on Derek's hand. Ethan crying. The way Caroline had reached for me. As I drove away, George listened without interrupting. Did not offer advice or comfort. Just sat there nursing his whiskey. His weathered face unreadable in the lamplight. When I finished, the silence stretched between us like something physical. "You are not alone in this, Jim," he said finally. 4 words. That was all. But something in my chest loosened, just enough to let me breathe. "I do not know what to do," I admitted. "You will." He leaned back, the chair groaning. "But not tonight. Tonight you sit here and breathe." So I did. My phone started buzzing around 4:30. I had forgotten about it until it began vibrating against my thigh like an angry wasp. I pulled it out. Caroline's name lit up the screen. 1 missed call. Then 5. Then 12. Then 23. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and watched it rattle with each new buzz. George raised an eyebrow. "You going to answer that?" "No." He nodded. Did not push. By 8, the count had climbed to 43 missed calls from Caroline, 9 from Derek, and a string of text messages I could not bring myself to read. Except one. From Sophie. "Dad, I am so sorry. I should have told you sooner." I opened it. My thumb hovered over the screen. "2 years ago, Caroline asked me to lie to you. She said she needed money for an emergency and wanted me to tell you it was for me, that I needed help with the mortgage. I said no. I told her to be honest with you, but she got the money somehow anyway. And then Derek came along and everything got worse. I tried to warn you about them, Dad. I tried. I am so sorry." I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone down very carefully, like it might shatter, and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. "Jim?" George's voice, quiet. "She has been lying to me for 2 years," I said. "At least 2 years. Maybe longer. And I did not see it." "You saw what she wanted you to see," George said. "That is not on you." But it was. I was her father. I should have known. Should have seen the signs. Should have listened when Sophie tried to tell me something was wrong last Christmas, and I brushed it off because I did not want to believe my own daughter could look me in the eyes and lie. The grief hit me like a fist to the sternum. I doubled over, a sound tearing out of my throat that did not sound human, and the tears came in hot, choking waves. I cried for Eleanor. Who would have seen this coming? Who would have sat me down and told me in her calm way that love does not mean letting people hurt you? I cried for Caroline. For the little girl who used to sit on my shoulders between the vine rows, asking 1,000 questions. For the woman she had become, or maybe the woman she had always been, and I had refused to see. And I cried for myself. Because somewhere along the line, I had lost my daughter. And I did not even know when. George was beside me, his hand on my back, solid and steady, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. By the time I could breathe again, it was full dark. George had turned on a lamp, refilled my whiskey without asking. He pulled a pillow and blanket from the hall closet. "Guest room is yours," he said, "but I am betting you will not sleep." He was right. At 1 in the morning I picked up my phone, scrolled past the 51 missed calls, past Caroline's messages. "Dad, please, call me back. You are overreacting." Past Derek's cold texts. "You are making a mistake. Call your daughter." I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I had not called in 3 years. Sam Yoder, agricultural attorney. His father had worked as a vineyard hand for my father 30 years ago. I had helped Sam's family keep their land when they hit hard times. Now I needed him to help me keep mine. I typed out a message, thumb slow on the screen. "Sam, this is Jim Prescott. I need your help. Can we meet tomorrow morning? It is urgent." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I lay back on George's couch, closed my eyes, and listened to the old house settle around me. Tomorrow I would fight. Tonight I just needed to survive. George was already up when I came downstairs. The smell of strong coffee filled his kitchen like a lifeline. He did not ask how I slept. The answer was written across my face. Just poured me a mug and set it on the table next to a plate of toast. "Hear back from your lawyer?" he asked. I checked my phone. Sam had replied at 6:45. "Can meet at 10. Bring any documents you have." "Yeah," I said. 10 o'clock. George pushed the toast toward me. "Eat something first. You are no good to anyone if you pass out in the man's office." So I ate, even though the bread tasted like sawdust, and drank the coffee, and tried not to think about the 53 new missed calls that had piled up overnight. Sam Yoder's office sat on Main Street in Charlottesville, a narrow brick building with tall windows and wooden floors that groaned under every step. The walls were lined with agricultural law books and framed certificates. Sam himself was waiting when I arrived. 32 years old. Dark hair, wire-rimmed glasses, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He stood and shook my hand with a grip that reminded me of his father's. "Mr. Prescott," he said. "Sit down. Show me what you have." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I had taken of the document Caroline had given me 6 months ago. I had found it in my filing cabinet at home, tucked between tax returns, labeled Estate Planning, Prescott Vineyards. Sam studied the screen, his face giving nothing away. Then he pulled out a legal pad. "Walk me through what she told you when you signed this." It was April. She said she wanted more authority to make decisions when I was not around. Approving small purchases, signing off on delivery schedules. She said it would take pressure off me. Did she mention ownership? No. Percentage transfer? No. Control of the vineyard? Absolutely not. My jaw tightened. She said, "Dad, just sign this, so I can handle things when you are on vacation. It will make everything easier." Sam wrote that down word for word. Then he looked up. "Mr. Prescott, this is not an estate planning document. This is a transfer of ownership. 55% of Prescott Vineyards, transferred to Caroline Prescott Walsh, effective immediately upon your signature." The room tilted the same way it had yesterday, but she said, "I know what she said." Sam's voice was gentle but firm. "And that is the problem. This document is legally binding. You signed it. It was notarized. But if we can prove she deliberately misrepresented what it was, that she lied about its contents to obtain your consent, we can argue fraud in the inducement and have it voided. Can we do that? Maybe. It depends on evidence. Emails, texts, witnesses. It was all in person. Just us." Sam frowned. "That makes it harder. Your word against hers." He tapped the legal pad. "But if there is a pattern of deception, that helps. And if we find evidence she has been planning this for a while, even better." He leaned forward. "Jim, I need you to go to the vineyard today. Document everything you can. Photos of files, computers, anything. Do not take anything physical. And whatever you do not confront them." The drive to Prescott Vineyards took 20 minutes from Charlottesville. The same road I had driven 10,000 times, past the white fences and rolling pastures and the little farm stand on Route 250 that sold peaches in summer. I turned onto the gravel lane that led to the property and stopped. There was a new sign hanging beneath the Prescott Vineyards logo. Crisp, professional. Like it had been printed that morning. Under new management. Caroline Walsh, Director of Operations. I stared at it and felt something cold and sharp twist behind my ribs. She had made it official. Publicly claimed the vineyard 3 generations of Prescotts had built with their hands and their backs and their stubborn love of this land. I pulled up to the main gate. Got out. Reached for my key. It did not fit. I tried again, slower, thinking maybe I had the wrong one. Same result. They had changed the locks. The gate that I had installed myself 20 years ago. The iron gate with the grapevine pattern Eleanor had designed. Did not recognize me anymore. I stood there for a long moment, the afternoon heat pressing down, and felt something crack inside my chest. Then I pressed the intercom. Footsteps on gravel. The gate opened just enough for a man I did not recognize to step through. Young, broad-shouldered, wearing a black polo shirt with a security company logo on the chest. "Can I help you?" he said. "I own this vineyard." "I am sorry, sir. I have instructions that no one enters without authorization from Miss Walsh." Before I could respond, Derek appeared behind the guard. Same linen blazer. Same cold smile. My father's ring catching the sunlight on his hand. "James," he said. "Not Mr. Prescott? Not Jim? Just my name. Flat and final. I am afraid you cannot be here. This is my property, Derek." It was. He pulled out his phone, swiped, turned the screen toward me. An email from Caroline dated that morning. Effective immediately. James Prescott is prohibited from entering vineyard property without prior written authorization. Caroline, as majority owner, has the authority to make this decision. You are locking me out of my own vineyard. We are protecting the business. He smiled. Have a good day, James. He stepped back. The guard closed the gate. The lock clicked with a sound like a bone snapping. I stood there staring through the iron bars at the vine rows my grandfather had planted, at the stone house my father had built, at the oak tree, where 3 hours ago my grandson had sat on my lap, eating bruschetta and asking about grape colors. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. The sign, the gate, the guard. Open voice memo and recorded everything Derek had said. Date, time, location. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the phone twice. Document everything, Sam had said. So I documented. Then I heard a sound behind me. Not the main gate. The old service path that ran along the eastern fence, half hidden by overgrown blackberry bushes. A gate creaked, the one that had needed oiling for 3 years, and Frank Moretti stepped through. He looked both ways, then hurried toward me, breathing hard. He was carrying a thick manila envelope pressed against his chest, like something precious. "Mr. Prescott," he whispered when he reached me. "I saw what happened. I am sorry." "Frank, what is that?" "Everything." He pressed the envelope into my hands. 3 years of financial records. Contracts. Transaction logs. I made copies last week. Because he stopped, glanced over his shoulder. Because something did not feel right. The numbers. There are things that do not add up. I tried to tell you, but Caroline intercepted my emails. Said she would handle it. His eyes were bright with tears. "It is your vineyard, Mr. Prescott. You deserve to know. Frank, you could lose your job for this. Some things matter more than a job." He squeezed my hand. "Be careful. Please." Then he turned and disappeared back through the service gate, the blackberry bushes swallowing him whole. I stood there holding the envelope, feeling its weight like a grenade with the pin already pulled. I drove back to George's house in a daze. The roads blurred. The stoplights seemed like suggestions. I must have obeyed them because I did not get pulled over. but I do not remember making a single conscious decision behind the wheel. My hands moved on the steering wheel, and the envelope sat on the passenger seat where Eleanor used to sit, heavy and still. George was on the porch when I pulled up, a book in his lap and a beer sweating on the railing. He took one look at my face and set the book down. "That bad?" he asked. I held up the envelope. "Frank got me something." "What kind of something?" "The kind that could change everything." We did not open it right away. George made dinner. Spaghetti with jarred sauce. The irony of two men over 65 eating like college students not lost on either of us. We ate in silence on the porch, watching the sky turn copper, then purple, then black. My phone buzzed a few more times. I ignored it. Around 8, we went inside. George cleared the kitchen table, and I opened the envelope. The first thing I pulled out was a contract, 23 pages. Dense legal language. Stamped with corporate letterhead I did not recognize. Meridian Wines International. I had never heard of them. I read the summary page twice before the words sank in. Derek had signed an exclusive distribution agreement with Meridian Wines 6 months ago. Every bottle of Prescott wine, every varietal, every vintage, funneled exclusively through a corporation based out of Northern Virginia. The contract transferred all distribution rights for a period of 10 years. My signature was nowhere on it. Caroline's was. Listed as majority owner. "He sold our distribution," I said, my voice flat. "To a corporation I have never heard of." "Without telling me." George leaned over my shoulder. "Can he do that?" "Not legally. Not without the full board's approval. Not without mine." I set the contract aside and pulled out the next stack. Spreadsheets, columns of numbers, dates, vendor names, transaction codes. 3 years of financial data that Frank had meticulously copied and organized, and scattered through the rows, cells highlighted in red. 34 of them. I started at the top. June 14th, previous year. $3,200. Memo line read. Equipment maintenance. Blue Valley Supply. I pulled out my phone and called Blue Valley. A woman answered on the 4th ring. "Blue Valley Supply. How can I help you?" "This is Jim Prescott from Prescott Vineyards. I am trying to verify a payment we made last June. $3,200 for equipment maintenance." Keys clicking. A pause. "Mr. Prescott, our records show your last order was in March. $1,200 for irrigation parts. Nothing in June." My stomach turned to ice. "You are sure?" "Positive." "Want me to email you a statement?" "Yes, please." I hung up and moved to the next red cell. August 22nd. $4,800. Consulting services. R. Thornton Associates. Called them. Same answer. No record of payment. September 9th. $2,600. Barrel repair. Shenandoah Cooperage. Never received a cent. By midnight, George and I had called 6 vendors listed in the flagged transactions. 4 confirmed they had never received the payments attributed to them. 2 were legitimate, real invoices for real work. But 4 out of 6 were ghosts. Money that had left my accounts and gone somewhere, but not where the book said. George made a pot of coffee around 12:30, strong enough to dissolve a horseshoe, and sat back down across from me. His face had gone from curious to grim. "How many total?" he asked. I scrolled through the red cells. 34. Over how long? 18 months, roughly. I did the math. 34 transactions averaging around $7,500 each. The total made my vision blur. $260,000. "Jesus," George whispered, but it was worse than that. I stared at the numbers, and something Sam's words had triggered clicked into place. Not a single transaction exceeded $9,800. Most ranged between $1,500 and $6,500, small enough to slip through, large enough to add up to a fortune. "Banks report transactions over $10,000 to the IRS, I said slowly. "Federal anti-money laundering law." He stayed under, every single time. George's eyes went hard. That is not an accident. No. That is someone who knows exactly what he is doing. Systematic. Deliberate. 18 months of draining my vineyard. Like a slow bleed. And Caroline, whether she had known from the beginning or figured it out later, had helped him hide it by intercepting Frank's emails and keeping me away from the books. I called Sam at 1 in the morning. He answered on the second ring, voice rough with sleep but alert the moment I said the number. 260,000. He repeated. 34 transactions. All under 10,000. That is textbook embezzlement. Textbook structuring. I will get a forensic accountant on this first thing in the morning. Patricia Nguyen. She is expensive, but she is the best. Do it. Jim, how are you holding up? I am fine, I lied. I hung up and reached for my coffee. Cold. I drank it anyway. George had gone quiet, staring at the spreadsheets still glowing on the table between us like an accusation. Then my phone buzzed. Not a call this time. An email. Bank notification. Important account update. I opened it. Dear Mr. Prescott, we are writing to inform you that your personal checking account has been frozen effective immediately due to a power of attorney authorization submitted by Miss Caroline Prescott Walsh. Per the document, Miss Prescott Walsh has been granted full authority over your financial accounts during a period of incapacity. If you believe this action has been taken in error, please contact our customer service department. I read it 3 times. A power of attorney, filed by my daughter, claiming I was incapacitated. I checked my balance. $280, an account that should have held close to 18,000. I set the phone down very carefully and looked at George. She is not just taking the vineyard, I said. She is trying to erase me. The phone call came at 7 the next morning. I was sitting at George's kitchen table staring at the spreadsheets I had not been able to stop looking at since midnight when Sophie's name lit up the screen. Dad. Her voice was tight. The kind of tight that meant she was trying very hard not to scream. Have you been online? No. Caroline posted a video last night. On her personal page and the vineyard's business account, my stomach clenched. What kind of video? Sophie took a breath. She is sitting in the tasting room, looking sad, talking about how worried she is about you. She says you have been showing signs of cognitive decline for over a year, forgetting things, repeating yourself, getting confused. She says the family has been trying to protect you quietly, but that your behavior at the festival made it clear you need professional help. I closed my eyes. People are commenting, Dad. Neighbors, customers, saying they are praying for you, saying they had no idea. Someone from the Charlottesville paper shared it. It is a lie, Sophie. I know it is a lie. But they do not know that. I hung up and sat there in the silence of George's kitchen, the coffee going cold in my hands, and understood. This was not random. This was strategy. The power of attorney claiming incapacity. The video painting me as a confused old man losing his grip. If everyone believed I was declining, then the power of attorney did not look like theft. It looked like a daughter protecting her father. She was not just trying to erase me. She was rewriting me. George came in from the porch, took one look at my face, and sat down. What now? He asked. I told him. He listened, jaw tightening with each sentence. When I finished, he reached into his back pocket, pulled out his wallet, and counted out $300 in worn 20s and 50s, pressed the cash into my hand. You would do the same for me, he said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. 66 years old, and I was borrowing grocery money from my best friend because my daughter had locked me out of my own accounts. The humiliation burned worse than the fear. I need to see Maria, I said. Maria Conti. If Caroline is controlling the narrative online, I need the community to hear the truth from someone they trust. And there is nobody in Charlottesville people trust more than Maria. George grabbed his keys. I will drive. Conti sat on the downtown mall in Charlottesville. A narrow brick restaurant with checkered tablecloths and photographs of Maria's family covering every inch of wall space. She had opened it 30 years ago with her husband Antonio, who passed in 2018, and she had kept it running through sheer force of personality and the best osso buco south of New York. We found her in the kitchen at 9 in the morning, flour on her apron, shouting instructions at her sous chef in rapid Italian. She looked up when we came in, smiled wide, and then saw my face. The smile vanished. "Jimmy." She wiped her hands on a towel. "What happened?" We sat at the corner table, the one she reserved for family, and I told her everything. The ultimatum, the 55%, the locked gate, the embezzlement, the frozen account, the video. Maria listened with her hands flat on the table, her dark eyes going from concern to furious, to something that looked like the calm before a hurricane. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then she slammed her palm on the table so hard the salt shaker jumped. "Che schifo," she shouted, loud enough that her sous chef poked his head out of the kitchen doorway. "That man comes into your vineyard, steals your money, locks you out, and now your daughter is telling people you are crazy? In my restaurant I serve Prescott wine for 25 years. 25 years, Jimmy? Your wife Eleanor, God rest her soul. She sat at this table and we planned the first harvest festival together over a bottle of Viognier. And now this snake thinks he can put a new label on your wine and I will just accept it?" She stood up, pulled her phone from her apron pocket, and started dialing. "Maria, what are you doing?" What I should have done the moment that man showed his face in this valley. She held up a finger as someone answered. "Roberto? It is Maria. Listen to me. That new wine from Prescott with the different label? Do not buy it. Do not stock it. I will explain later, but trust me." She hung up and dialed again. "Teresa? Maria. Same thing. New Prescott label. Do not touch it." And again. "Paul. It is Maria Conti. I need you to listen." In 45 minutes she called 8 restaurants and wine shops. Every single one agreed to refuse the new Meridian-branded Prescott wine. Some because they trusted Maria. Some because they had already noticed something was off. One, a shop owner in Staunton, said he had been suspicious when Derek came in 2 months ago trying to renegotiate terms without Jim present. By noon, Maria had posted a message on her restaurant's page. A simple statement. "Conti's proudly serves authentic Prescott Vineyards wine, made by Jim Prescott and his team. We do not carry rebranded product from outside distributors. Support local. Support the people who built this valley." It spread fast. Comments pouring in. People asking questions. People who had seen Caroline's video now seeing Maria's post and wondering which story was true. Derek's phone must have been melting because by 2 in the afternoon, Maria's sous chef reported that someone from Prescott management had called the restaurant demanding she take the post down. Maria's response, relayed through her sous chef with a grin, was 2 words in Italian that I will not translate. I was sitting in George's truck outside Conti's, exhausted and raw, when my phone buzzed. Sam Yoder. "Jim, I have 2 things. Linda Jeffries, document examiner, can see you tomorrow at 1. And Patricia Nguyen finished her preliminary analysis of the financial records you gave me. And 34 fraudulent transactions. $260,000. Systematic structuring below the federal reporting threshold." He paused. "Jim, we have got him." I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in 3 days, something that was not grief or rage moved through my chest. It was small and fragile, and I was almost afraid to name it. Hope. Linda Jeffries kept her office on West Main Street in a narrow building wedged between a law firm and a vintage bookshop. The sign on the door was small and professional. Jeffries Forensic Document Analysis. Inside, it looked more like a laboratory than an office. White walls, metal shelves lined with binders, a long table covered in magnifying lamps and instruments I could not name. The air smelled like paper and rubbing alcohol. Linda herself was mid-50s, gray hair pulled back tight, frameless glasses, an expression that said she had seen every kind of forgery the human imagination could produce, and none of them impressed her anymore. She shook my hand when Sam introduced us. Mr. Prescott, I understand you have a disputed power of attorney. That is putting it mildly, I said. I handed her the document. I had picked up a copy from the bank that morning. After 40 minutes, on hold, and 3 transfers between departments. 3 pages, neatly printed. My signature at the bottom of the second page. Except it was not my signature. It looked like mine the way a photocopy looks like the original. Too clean. Too perfect. Linda set the document under a large magnifying lamp and pulled on latex gloves. Sam had come prepared. He handed her a folder containing 10 samples of my real signature. Contracts, checks, invoices spanning the last 5 years. Linda arranged them in a neat row beside the power of attorney, leaned over the lamp with a jeweler's loupe in one hand, and went silent. The room held its breath. I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and the faint tick of a clock on the wall. Sam stood beside me, arms crossed, watching Linda work with the patience of a man who understood that this moment could determine everything. After what felt like an hour but was probably closer to 8 minutes, Linda straightened and removed the loupe. This signature is forged, she said. I exhaled. You are sure? Positive. She gestured to the power of attorney. The line weight is inconsistent. Your authentic signatures show a distinct upward stroke on the final letter of Prescott. This one flattens. The pressure pattern does not match any of the 10 samples. She switched off the magnifying lamp and turned on a different one. Ultraviolet. The document glowed faintly, and she pointed to the area near the signature. This section shows signs of digital manipulation. The ink density is uneven compared to the rest of the document. Someone scanned one of your real signatures, cleaned it up in editing software, and placed it onto this form before printing. Can you testify to that in court? Sam asked. Absolutely. I will have a full report ready by tomorrow. Comparison images, analysis methodology, and my professional opinion that this signature was not made by James Prescott. Sam nodded. Make it priority. We may need it sooner than expected. We left Linda's office and walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop where Patricia Nguyen was waiting. She sat at a corner table, late 40s, dark suit, reading glasses on a chain, a laptop open in front of her, surrounded by printed spreadsheets covered in handwritten notes. She stood when she saw us. Mr. Prescott. Sam. She shook my hand firmly. I have been through the financial records your vineyard manager provided. 3 years of transaction data. We sat down. Patricia turned her laptop toward us. 34 transactions over 18 months totaling $260,000 that are fraudulent. Each was recorded as a legitimate business expense, equipment repairs, vendor payments, consulting fees. But when cross-referenced with actual vendor records, the money never arrived at its stated destination. She scrolled through a spreadsheet, rows highlighted in red. The same red cells Frank had flagged. The amounts range from $1,200 to $6,500. None exceeds $9,800. This is deliberate structuring to avoid the federal currency transaction report threshold of $10,000. Which means? I asked. Though I already knew. Which means whoever did this understood federal banking regulations and intentionally kept each transaction below the reporting limit to avoid detection. This is not carelessness, Mr. Prescott. This is calculated fraud. Sam leaned back. In your professional opinion, what are we looking at? Embezzlement. Systematic and sustained over 18 months. If this goes to court, I can testify to the pattern, the structuring, and the discrepancy between recorded and actual payments. I stared at the red rows on the screen. $260,000 drained from the vineyard my grandfather had planted, money that should have gone to new barrels, to equipment, to the workers who kept the vines alive. Gone. funneled into accounts I could not trace by a man who smiled while he did it. Sam gathered his notes, thanked Patricia, and walked me outside. The afternoon sun was low over the downtown mall, casting long shadows across the brick sidewalk. He stopped beside my truck and pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Jim, there is one more thing." He opened the folder to a page I had seen 100 times, but never thought twice about. The Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Control License for Prescott Vineyards. The permit that authorized us to produce, store, and sell wine. Without it, the vineyard was just farmland. "Whose name is on this license?" Sam asked. I looked. The line read, "Licensee, James W. Prescott. Individual. Not Prescott Vineyards LLC. Not Caroline Prescott Walsh. My name. Personal." I looked up at Sam. He was almost smiling. "Derek can take the land," Sam said slowly. "He can change the signs and hire security guards and lock you out of every gate on the property. But without your name on this license, without your explicit written authorization, he cannot legally produce, store, or sell a single bottle of wine. Not one. The entire operation is worthless without you." For the first time in 2 weeks, I smiled. It was small and it hurt, and it probably looked more like a grimace than anything else. But it was real. "When is the hearing?" I asked. "I am filing the emergency motion tonight. If Judge Callahan takes it, we could be in court within a week." Sam clapped me on the shoulder. "Jim, we are going to win this." I looked down the street toward the mountains, the Blue Ridge turning purple in the fading light. The same mountains my grandfather had looked at when he decided this valley was worth building a life in. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think we are." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, a handful of benches that looked like church pews. The seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia hung behind the judge's bench, a woman standing over a fallen tyrant, the state motto circling the edge, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants. I had driven past this building 1,000 times on my way to the hardware store. Never imagined I would be sitting inside it fighting for the vineyard my grandfather planted. Sam sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, folders stacked in precise rows, a legal pad covered in notes, a calm I envied radiating from him like heat from a wood stove. Across the aisle, Caroline sat with Derek and their attorney, Richard Ames. Mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, a suit that probably cost what I used to spend on a month of barrel repairs. Caroline would not look at me. Her hands were folded so tightly in her lap, her knuckles had gone white. Derek stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. But I caught the way his leg bounced under the table. "Nervous." "Good." George sat in the gallery behind me. I did not turn around, but I could feel him there, solid and steady as the mountains outside. At 9, the bailiff stood. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Robert Callahan presiding. Callahan was 61. Gray hair cropped short, black robe pressed sharp. He had a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for theatrics. He sat down, adjusted his reading glasses, and opened the file. "This is an emergency hearing in the matter of James Prescott versus Caroline Prescott Walsh and Derek Walsh. Mr. Yoder, you filed the motion. Proceed." Sam stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. My client, James Prescott, has been the victim of systematic fraud. Over 18 months, his daughter and son-in-law forged legal documents, embezzled $260,000 from his vineyard, and attempted to seize control of a 3-generation family business through deception." Richard Ames rose. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is presenting allegations as established facts. My clients deny all charges." Callahan did not blink. "Mr. Ames, you will have your turn. Sit down." He looked at Sam. "Continue." Sam clicked a remote. The screen on the wall lit up with a scanned image of the power of attorney Caroline had filed 8 months ago. "This document was submitted to Mr. Prescott's bank last February, claiming he suffered from cognitive incapacity and granting his daughter full control of his finances. Mr. Prescott never signed it. We have expert testimony to prove it. He turned to the gallery. I would like to call Linda Jeffries to the stand. Linda walked forward, took the oath, and sat down with the posture of someone who had done this dozens of times. Please state your name and occupation for the record. Linda Jeffries, Forensic Document Examiner. 26 years of experience. Miss Jeffries, did you examine the power of attorney in question? I did. What did you find? Linda's voice was calm and precise. The signature attributed to James Prescott is a forgery. I compared it to 10 authenticated samples spanning 5 years. The line weight is inconsistent. The pressure pattern does not match. The terminal stroke on the surname deviates significantly from all known examples. Sam changed the screen. 2 signatures appeared side by side. Mine from a contract 3 years ago, and the one on the power of attorney. Even from across the courtroom, I could see the difference. Additionally, Linda continued, ultraviolet analysis revealed digital manipulation in the signature area. The ink density does not match the surrounding text. My conclusion is that someone scanned an authentic signature, digitally altered it, and inserted it into this document before printing. In your professional opinion, Sam asked, is this signature genuine? No. It is not. Ames stood. Miss Jeffries, is it not possible that Mr. Prescott's handwriting simply changed over time due to age or health factors? Linda looked at him the way a professor looks at a student who is asked a question that reveals they did not do the reading. Handwriting evolves gradually over decades. This shows abrupt deviations inconsistent with natural aging, combined with clear digital artifacts. I am confident this is a forgery. Ames sat down. I saw Derek swallow hard. Sam called his second witness. The plaintiff calls Patricia Nguyen. Patricia took the stand, identified herself as a certified public accountant with 22 years of experience in forensic accounting, and opened a laptop. Miss Nguyen, did you review financial records from Prescott Vineyards? I did. 3 years of transaction data, including ledgers, bank statements, and vendor records. What did you discover? 34 transactions over 18 months, totaling $260,000 that appear fraudulent. The screen changed to a spreadsheet, rows glowing red. Each transaction was recorded as a legitimate business expense. Equipment repair, consulting fees, vendor payments. However, when cross-referenced with actual vendor records, the majority of these payments were never received by the listed vendors. Can you describe the pattern? Transaction amounts ranged from $1,200 to $6,500. None exceeded $9,800. Patricia paused. The federal currency transaction report threshold is $10,000. Staying below that limit is a known technique to avoid triggering automatic bank reporting to the IRS. In forensic accounting, we call this structuring. And in your professional opinion, this is embezzlement. Systematic, sustained, and deliberately structured to evade detection. The courtroom had gone very still. I could hear the fluorescent lights and the scratch of Callahan's pen on his legal pad. Caroline was crying silently, mascara running. Derek's leg had stopped bouncing. He was completely still now, the way an animal goes still when it realizes the trap has closed. Ames stood for what felt like a last attempt. Your Honor, this is a family disagreement that has been blown out of proportion. Mr. Prescott willingly delegated authority to his daughter. Any financial irregularities are accounting errors, not criminal acts. Callahan looked at him over his reading glasses. Mr. Ames, I have expert testimony confirming a forged signature and forensic evidence of systematic financial fraud. If your best defense is accounting errors, I suggest you reconsider your strategy. Ames sat down heavily. Sam stood one more time. Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence. Sam reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He held it up so the courtroom could see. then placed it on the overhead projector. The screen filled with the image of an official document bearing the seal of the Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Control Authority. Your Honor, this is the ABC license for Prescott Vineyards, the permit that authorizes the production, storage, and sale of wine on the property. Without this license, no wine can be legally made or sold. The vineyard is, in effect, farmland. Callahan leaned forward slightly. Go on. The licensee listed on this permit is James W. Prescott, individual. Not Prescott Vineyards, LLC. Not Caroline Prescott Walsh. Not any corporate entity. The license is held personally by my client and has been since he first applied for it 38 years ago. Sam let that hang in the air for a moment. What this means, Your Honor, is that even if the ownership transfer were valid, even if the defendants legitimately controlled 55% of the vineyard's land and assets, they cannot legally produce, store, or sell a single bottle of wine without James Prescott's explicit written authorization. The entire business operation is dependent on a license that belongs to one man. And that man is sitting right here. I watched Derek's face. The color drained out of it like wine poured down a sink. His mouth opened, closed. He turned to Ames. Ames was already leaning over, whispering urgently. But there was nothing to whisper. The math was simple. Land without a license was dirt. Vines without a permit were decoration. Derek had spent 18 months stealing money and maneuvering for control of a business that could not function without the one person he had tried to erase. Ames stood. Objection, Your Honor. The ABC license is irrelevant to the ownership dispute. Callahan looked at him the way a man looks at a fly that has landed on his dinner. Overruled. If the defendant controls property but cannot legally operate the business on that property, the practical value of the ownership transfer is directly at issue. The license is entirely relevant. He turned back to Sam. Anything else, Mr. Yoder? No, Your Honor. The plaintiff rests. Callahan removed his reading glasses and set them on the bench. The courtroom went silent. I could hear Caroline's breathing, shallow and ragged. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall behind me. I could hear my own heart. Here is what I see, Callahan said. A power of attorney with a forged signature, confirmed by a forensic document examiner with 26 years of experience. Testimony from a certified public accountant identifying systematic embezzlement totaling $260,000, deliberately structured to avoid federal reporting requirements. An ownership transfer that the plaintiff credibly alleges was obtained through misrepresentation, and an ABC license that renders the entire transfer functionally meaningless without the plaintiff's cooperation. He looked at Caroline. Miss Prescott Walsh, does your counsel have evidence to refute these findings? Ames whispered to Caroline. She shook her head, tears streaming. No, Your Honor, Ames said. Callahan picked up his pen. My ruling is as follows. First, the power of attorney, submitted by Caroline Prescott Walsh, is void, effective immediately, due to fraudulent signature. Second, the transfer of 55% ownership of Prescott Vineyards is suspended pending full investigation into fraud in the inducement. Third, temporary full operational control is restored to James Prescott. Fourth, personal bank accounts of Caroline Prescott Walsh and Derek Walsh are frozen pending resolution of embezzlement allegations. Fifth, a restraining order is issued prohibiting Miss Prescott Walsh and Mr. Walsh from contacting Mr. Prescott or entering Prescott Vineyards property without prior court approval. Sixth, this matter is referred to the Albemarle County Commonwealth Attorney for criminal investigation. His gavel came down. One sharp crack that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Court adjourned. I stood. The floor tilted. Sam's hand caught my elbow. You okay? Yeah, I said. But I was not. I had won. The vineyard, the accounts, the license. My life handed back to me in a neat legal package. So, Why did I feel like someone had hollowed me out with a spoon? George was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He did not speak, just fell into step beside me as I walked down the courthouse steps into the October sunlight. The mountains were sharp against a blue sky. The air smelled like fallen leaves and wood smoke. A beautiful day. The kind Eleanor would have called perfect. My truck was across the street. I was halfway there when I heard her. "Dad." I stopped. "Dad, please." I turned. Caroline was coming down the steps, mascara streaking her face, heels catching on the stone. Derek was behind her, his expression unreadable. Ames had already disappeared. "Dad, I am so sorry." Her voice broke in half. "I did not know it would go this far. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to help Derek and I thought I could fix it before you found out, and I know that sounds terrible, but I swear I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at her. At the woman who used to sit on my shoulders between the vine rows, who had helped me bottle the first vintage of Eleanor's late harvest wine, who had pressed her small hands into the wet cement of the cellar floor when she was 6 and laughed when I told her those handprints would be there forever. "Caroline," I said quietly. Hope flickered in her red, swollen eyes. I turned and walked to my truck. Behind me I heard her sob. Heard Derek's voice, low and urgent. Heard George's boots on the pavement, steady and unhurried. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away from the courthouse. In the rearview mirror, Caroline stood on the bottom step, one hand pressed against her chest, the other hanging at her side. She looked small. She looked broken. Victory tasted like ash. If you are still here, comment the word justice so I know you are still with me. And if it were you, when everything is taken and your dignity is crushed, would you walk away or stay and fight to expose the truth? I had not made it halfway across the parking lot when I heard footsteps. Fast, uneven. The sound of dress shoes slapping pavement at a run. I knew who it was before I turned around. Derek was coming toward me, tie loosened, blazer gone, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. His face was red and twisted into something between rage and terror. He stopped about 8 feet away, breathing hard. "You happy now, James?" I did not answer. Pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. Then I held it up so he could see exactly what I was doing. His face contorted. "You are recording me? Seriously?" I said nothing. Waited. Derek laughed, sharp and bitter. The kind of laugh that comes out when a man has nothing left to lose and knows it. "You want the truth? Fine. You want to know why I took the money? I did not move. I owe people, James. Bad people. $260,000 in debts from an investment fund that went sideways 3 years ago. I thought I could make it back. I thought if I just had enough time, enough capital, I could cover it before anyone noticed." His voice cracked. "But the fund collapsed, and the people who backed it, they do not send polite letters. They do not file lawsuits. They come to your house. They threaten your family." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I made bad bets. I know that. And Caroline, she was just trying to save me. She did not want to steal from you. She just wanted to keep me alive." The confession hung between us, raw and desperate. I lowered the phone slightly. "So you stole from my vineyard to pay off your gambling debts," I said quietly. "I was going to pay it back." "With what?" He did not answer. "You forged my signature. You manipulated my daughter into committing fraud. You tried to take everything 3 generations of my family built. And now you are telling me it is because you made bad bets. I am telling you I am desperate." His voice rose. "I am telling you I do not know what else to do. Then you should have asked for help." "I did." He stopped, looked away. "I asked Caroline, and she said she would fix it. She said she would take care of everything. And I let her, because I am a coward." For the first time since this nightmare started, I saw something in Derek that was not arrogance or calculation. I saw fear. Real, bone-deep fear. The kind that lives in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. And I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Dad! Caroline was running across the parking lot from the side street, pale, hair wild. She grabbed Derek's arm and pulled him back. Derek, stop. Just stop. She turned to me. Dad, please. Can we talk? I will do anything. I will pay back every cent. I will work for free. I will. You chose him, I said. She froze. 2 years ago you chose him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to let him steal from me. You chose to forge my name and try to take my vineyard. I looked at her. You made your choice, Caroline. Now you have to live with it. Her face crumpled. She sank onto the curb, hands covering her face, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Derek stood over her, his expression shifting from desperation to something empty. He looked at me one last time, then took Caroline's arm and led her to their car. She did not resist. Just let him guide her. Sobs muffled against his shoulder. I stood in the parking lot, phone still in my hand. Recording. Still running. I stopped it. Saved it. Put the phone away. Then I walked to my truck and drove back to George's house. The evening was quiet. George made soup. We ate on the porch without talking. The mountains turned dark against a sky full of stars. My phone sat silent on the table. For the first time in 2 weeks, nobody was calling. Around 7, I heard tires on the gravel. Sophie's Honda. She got out, carrying something pressed against her chest, a leather-bound book, small, dark brown, worn soft at the edges. She walked up the porch steps and stopped in front of me. Dad, I need to give you something. I set down my soup. I found this in the wine cellar last week. Behind the 1997 reserve barrels, Mom must have hidden it there before she passed. Her voice cracked. I think she wanted you to find it when you needed it most. She held out the journal. Eleanor's handwriting was on the first page, the looping familiar script I would recognize anywhere. Sophie kissed my cheek, got back in her car, and drove away before I could speak. George looked at me. Want me to give you a minute? Stay, I said. I opened the journal. The pages were slightly yellowed. The ink faded in places. Eleanor had dated the first entry 18 months before she died. Most of the entries were about the vineyard. Notes on the late harvest blend. Observations about weather patterns. A sketch of the old oak tree. But near the back, the handwriting changed. Shakier. The entries were shorter. I turned to the last page and read, My dearest Jim, if you are reading this, then Caroline has done something that broke your heart. I do not know what exactly, but I know our daughter. She is weak when she loves the wrong person. She makes choices with her heart instead of her head. And sometimes those choices destroy the people who love her most. I am writing this because I will not be there to say it in person. The doctors say I have maybe 4 months. And I need you to hear this while I can still hold a pen. Caroline is flawed. Whatever she has done, I am sure it feels unforgivable. But Jim, she is also Ethan's mother. That little boy needs his grandfather. He needs you to teach him about the vines and the soil and what it means to build something that lasts. But he also needs his mother. He needs her love and her presence and her imperfect, complicated humanity. So I am asking you, give Caroline a second chance. Not because she deserves it. Not because what she did was okay. But because Ethan deserves a whole family. And because forgiveness is not for them, Jim. Forgiveness is for you. It is about letting go of the anger so it does not consume you the way this illness is consuming me. I love you. I have loved you since the first time you poured me a glass of wine from a vine your father planted and told me you were going to spend the rest of your life on this hill. Give our daughter a chance. For Ethan. For me. For yourself. Always, Eleanor. I read it 3 times. My vision blurred, and I did not bother wiping my eyes. George sat beside me, silent, steady, the way he had been for 40 years. I closed the journal carefully, held it against my chest, and looked at him. "I know what I have to do," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, I figured you did." The conference room at the Commonwealth Attorney's office had no windows. A long table, 8 chairs, a whiteboard on one wall, still smudged with notes from some previous case. The fluorescent lights hummed the way they do in places where lives get decided. Sam sat to my right. Folders stacked with the precision of a man who had spent 2 weeks building something airtight. Across the table, Caroline sat beside Derek and their attorney, Richard Ames. Caroline looked like she had not slept in days. Derek stared at the wood grain, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching at his temple. At the head of the table, Karen Rhodes, the Albemarle County Commonwealth Attorney, opened her file. 47 years old, dark hair cut to her shoulders, eyes that missed nothing. She had introduced herself as a prosecutor specializing in fraud and financial crimes, and she spoke with the kind of measured calm that made it clear she had done this before and would do it again tomorrow, without losing a minute of sleep. "Let us begin," she said. "Mr. Yoder, your client has proposed a plea agreement in lieu of full prosecution. Present the terms." Sam slid a typed document across the table. One copy to Karen, one to Ames. Caroline leaned over to read, her breath catching. "First," Sam began, "Derek Walsh will repay the full sum of $260,000 to James Prescott within 90 days. The method of repayment is Mr. Walsh's responsibility. Sale of assets, loans, liquidation of property, but the full amount must be returned." Derek's hands curled into fists. "Second, Derek Walsh will vacate the Commonwealth of Virginia within 30 days and is prohibited from returning for a period of 5 years. Violation results in immediate imprisonment." "That is insane," Derek muttered. Ames put a hand on his arm. "Let him finish." "Third, Caroline Prescott Walsh will resign from all positions at Prescott Vineyards, effective immediately and permanently. Fourth, Caroline will issue a public apology, posted on her social media accounts and delivered in person to the employees of Prescott Vineyards, acknowledging her role in the fraud and taking full responsibility." Caroline closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she did not speak. "Fifth, both Caroline Prescott Walsh and Derek Walsh will accept suspended sentences of 3 years probation. If either party violates any term of this agreement, any term, they will be immediately remanded to state prison to serve the full sentence." Karen looked up. "For the record, those sentences would be 2 to 5 years for Miss Prescott Walsh and 5 to 10 for Mr. Walsh." "Sixth," Sam said, "James Prescott will be granted visitation rights to his grandson Ethan, a minimum of twice per month. Caroline Prescott Walsh is prohibited from interfering with these visits. Failure to comply constitutes a violation of probation." Sam set the document down. "Those are the terms. Accept them, or Miss Rhodes proceeds with full prosecution." The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then Derek shoved his chair back, the legs shrieking against the floor. "This is vindictive. He is using the legal system to destroy us because he cannot stand that someone else might actually grow his precious vineyard into something worthwhile. Mr. Walsh." Karen Rhodes did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She just looked at him with the kind of authority that comes from 18 years of putting people in prison. "If you walk out of this room, I will file charges for theft by deception, forgery, and structuring financial transactions to evade reporting requirements. Under Virginia law, each charge carries a maximum sentence of 10 years. Combined, that is 20 years. I have expert testimony, forensic evidence, and a recorded confession you made in a parking lot 2 days ago." Derek went still. "You will be convicted," Karen continued. "You will go to prison, and when you are released, you will carry a felony record for the rest of your life. Or you can sit down, sign this paper, and walk out today with a chance to start over." She paused. "Your choice." Derek stood there breathing hard, his face cycling through rage and fear, and something that finally settled into defeat. Ames leaned in, whispered urgently. I could not hear the words, but I saw the moment Derek's shoulders dropped. He sat down. Karen looked at Caroline. "Miss Prescott Walsh, do you understand the terms?" "Yes." Caroline whispered. "Do you accept them voluntarily?" "Yes." She picked up the pen Karen offered. Her hand trembled so badly the first stroke was barely legible. She signed slowly, then pushed the document to Derek. He stared at it, grabbed the pen, signed in quick, angry strokes, and slammed it down. Karen collected the documents. "I will submit this to Judge Callahan for approval this afternoon." The courtroom was the same one. Same wood panels, same fluorescent hum, same seal of Virginia on the wall. Callahan reviewed the agreement, asked both defendants if they understood the terms and accepted them voluntarily, received 2 quiet affirmatives, and brought down his gavel. "This plea agreement is approved and binding. Mr. Walsh, you have 30 days to vacate Virginia. Miss Prescott Walsh, you have 72 hours to submit your resignation and issue your public apology. Violation of any term results in immediate arrest." One crack. Court adjourned. Outside, the afternoon sun cut hard and bright across the courthouse steps. Sam walked beside me toward my truck. George was already leaning against the tailgate, arms crossed, waiting. "Dad." I stopped. Caroline was standing at the bottom of the steps, alone. Derek had already gone to the car. Her face was swollen, her voice barely there. "I love you, Dad. I'm going to spend every day trying to make this right. I swear." I looked at her, at my daughter, at the woman who had lied, stolen, tried to erase me, at the woman who was also Ethan's mother, Eleanor's daughter, the little girl who had pressed her handprints into the cellar floor and laughed. "You have 5 years to prove it," I said. She stared at me, tears falling, and then something shifted in her face. Not relief exactly, something quieter, understanding maybe, or the beginning of it. I turned and walked to my truck. George fell into step beside me. Sam clapped my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Jim," Sam said. I wanted to believe him. But driving back toward the mountains with Eleanor's journal on the seat beside me, all I felt was tired. Tired and old, and missing the woman who would have known exactly what to say to make this feel less like losing. The gate was open when I pulled up. No security guard. No new sign. Just the iron grapevine pattern Eleanor had designed 20 years ago, standing wide in the morning light like it had been waiting for me. I sat in the truck for a moment, engine idling, hands on the wheel. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I had driven away from this place, with my daughter's voice cracking behind me and 50 people staring at their shoes. The vines looked the same. Rows of Cabernet Franc running up the eastern slope, the leaves just beginning to turn amber at the edges. The stone house looked the same. The oak tree, the string lights still hanging from the branches where nobody had bothered to take them down. But the sign that had read "under new management" was gone. Someone had already removed it. Only the faint outline of the adhesive remained on the post, a ghost of the words that had made my stomach drop 3 weeks ago. I killed the engine and stepped out. The air smelled like crushed leaves and cold earth, and the faint sweetness of late-season grapes still clinging to the vine. Home. This was home. Frank Moretti was standing at the entrance to the stone cellar, hands in the pockets of his canvas work pants, hat pulled low. He looked like he had been standing there for a while, maybe since sunrise. "Welcome home, Mr. Prescott," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were bright. I nodded, not trusting mine. By 9, I had called the full staff into the cellar. 14 people, electricians and vineyard hands, and the office staff who handled invoicing and shipping. They stood between the oak barrels and the stone walls, some leaning against the racks, some shifting nervously, all watching me. I stood at the head of the room and took a breath. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I know the past month has been a nightmare, and I need to say something before we move forward." The cellar was quiet, except for the faint drip of condensation from the ceiling. I made mistakes. Big ones. I handed over control of this vineyard because I was tired, because I was grieving, because I thought I was helping someone I loved, and in doing that I put all of you at risk. Your jobs, your livelihoods, your trust in this place. I paused. "I am sorry. I should have protected you, and I did not." Frank spoke first. "Mr. Prescott, you do not need to apologize to us." "Yes, I do. No." His voice was firm. "You fought for this vineyard. You fought for all of us. We trust you. We have always trusted you." He looked around the room. A few people nodded. Danny Torres, the new kid I had hired the week before, 23 years old, and so eager he showed up an hour early every morning, said quietly, "He is right, boss. We are with you." Something loosened in my chest. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." I laid out the plan. Prescott Vineyards was going to get smaller. No more chasing distribution deals or trying to compete with the big operations in Napa. We were going to focus on what we did best. Small batch, high quality, the kind of wine Eleanor had spent her life perfecting. "We are downsizing to 10, I said. "Core team only. Anyone who wants to move on. I will write you a reference and give you fair severance. No hard feelings." 4 people took the severance. 2 had been planning to leave anyway. The others wanted a fresh start away from the drama. I did not blame them. That left 10 of us. And it felt right. Caroline came on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced. I was in the back of the cellar checking barrel temperatures when Frank found me. "Your daughter is here," he said. "She says she needs to talk to the staff." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "She is following through on the apology." "Looks like it." I followed him to the front. Caroline stood near the cellar entrance, pale, hands clasped in front of her. She had posted the written apology online a week ago. I had not read it. But this was the in-person part. "Can I talk to everyone?" she asked. Her voice barely audible. "Go ahead." Frank called the staff. 10 people gathered between the barrels and the stone walls, the same walls where Caroline had played as a child, where her handprints were still pressed into the cement floor near the back corner. She stood in front of them looking like she might collapse. "I am here to apologize," she said. "I lied to you. I helped my husband steal from this vineyard. I betrayed my father, and I betrayed all of you." Her voice broke. "I know sorry is not enough, but I am so sorry." The room was quiet. Then Frank stepped forward. "I forgive you, Caroline." Not warm. Not cold. Just honest. A few others nodded. One woman turned and walked away without a word. I did not blame her either. Caroline left 10 minutes later, face streaked, shoulders hunched. She did not ask to talk to me. Did not look at me. This was not about me. That week I took Danny Torres out to the eastern slope for his first real lesson. We knelt in the dirt between the oldest vines, the ones Eleanor had called the grandparents, and I showed him how to test the soil. "Why do we test twice?" he asked, holding the pH meter like it might explode. "Because once is not enough," I said. "You test when you plant. You test before you harvest. And if you are smart, you test again after the first frost. Trust nothing. Verify everything." He grinned. "Got it, Mr. Prescott. Call me Jim." That evening I sat alone in the cellar, the barrels lined up in the darkness, the smell of oak and fermenting wine soft around me. Eleanor's journal lay on the barrel beside me, next to a framed photograph of her standing under the oak tree the year Ethan was born, laughing at something I had said. "I did it, Eleanor," I whispered. "We are healing." My phone buzzed. Bank notification. Deposit received. $90,000 from Derek Walsh. 1/3 of what he owed. The first installment, right on schedule. I stared at the number. 90,000. Enough to know he was complying. Enough to believe the rest would follow. I set the phone down and looked at the photograph. "We are going to be okay," I said. Eleanor smiled back at me from behind the glass, and for just a moment I could almost hear her voice. "Stop brooding, Jim. Go home and get some sleep." I smiled. And for the first time in a month, I did. The first arty snow fell on Prescott Vineyards the morning of December 23rd. Not the heavy kind that breaks branches and buries roads, but a light dusting, the kind Eleanor used to call angel sugar. I stood on the front porch with my coffee, watching it settle on the dormant vines like a white blanket tucked over sleeping children. The air smelled clean, sharp, the way only a Virginia winter morning can smell. Frank had hung a wreath on the cellar door without asking. I did not tell him to take it down. Sophie arrived that afternoon with 2 suitcases and a car full of grocery bags. She had driven 5 hours from Richmond, and her cheeks were pink from the heater she always ran too high. She stepped out wearing Eleanor's old camel coat, the one with the brass buttons, and for a moment I could not breathe. She must have seen my face, because she stopped halfway up the path and said, "Mom would have wanted someone to wear it." I carried her bags inside without answering. Some truths do not need a reply. We spent the evening in the kitchen the way we used to when she was a girl. Sophie rolled out pie dough on the marble counter Eleanor had insisted on installing in 1992. I peeled apples, keeping the skin in one long ribbon the way my mother taught me. The radio played old standards, and neither of us mentioned Caroline. It was not avoidance. It was rest. Sometimes a family needs permission to simply exist without discussing the wound. George Hadley came by at 7 with a bottle of his own blackberry wine and a ham from Pearson's Smokehouse. He sat at the kitchen table and told Sophie stories about her mother that even I had forgotten. How Eleanor once chased a fox out of the vineyard with nothing but a broom and a string of profanity that made the field workers applaud. How she used to label every jar of preserves with a small drawing of whoever she was thinking about when she sealed it. Sophie laughed until tears ran down her face, and I realized it was the first time I had heard her laugh like that in over a year. On Christmas Eve morning, I drove to the post office in Charlottesville to mail Danny Torres a gift card and a note thanking him for his first month of work. The boy had taken to the vineyard faster than anyone I had seen in 4 decades. He asked questions the way good students do, not to impress, but because the answers mattered to him. On my way back, I stopped at the hardware store for batteries and found myself standing in the toy aisle looking at a remote-controlled tractor. It was red with green wheels, absurdly oversized, the kind of thing an 8-year-old would drive across every surface in the house until the batteries died. I bought it for Ethan without thinking twice. Sophie and I decorated the tree that evening. We used Eleanor's ornaments, each one wrapped in tissue paper and stored in the wooden crate she had labeled Christmas Souls. There was the glass cardinal from our first anniversary, the clay handprint Sophie made in kindergarten, the tiny pair of brass binoculars Caroline had bought for me at a flea market when she was 10, back when she still thought I was the most interesting man alive. I held that ornament for a long time before I hung it on the branch closest to the window where the light would catch it. At 9:15, the phone rang. Sophie answered. I heard her voice shift from casual to careful, the way it does when she is managing someone else's emotions. She covered the receiver and looked at me. It is Caroline. She wants to know if she can bring Ethan tomorrow. The kitchen went quiet. The radio had stopped between songs, and the only sound was the furnace clicking on. What time? I said. She said noon. I nodded once. Sophie uncovered the receiver and said, Noon is fine. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in bed with Eleanor's journal on the nightstand and read her entry from December 1998. She had written about the year Caroline broke the living room window with a soccer ball and lied about it for 3 days before confessing. Eleanor wrote, She told the truth eventually. That is what matters. The delay is just fear, and fear is not the same as dishonesty. I closed the journal and stared at the ceiling until the light changed. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold. Sophie made French toast with cinnamon and powdered sugar. I set the table for 4. At 11:55, I heard tires on the gravel drive and looked out the window. Caroline's car stopped near the old oak tree. She sat behind the wheel for almost a minute before the passenger door opened, and Ethan burst out like a bird released from a cage. He ran across the yard in a blue coat 2 sizes too large, his boots barely touching the ground. He hit me at full speed, arms around my waist, face buried in my sweater. I put my hand on the back of his head and felt the warmth of him, the realness of him, and every legal document and courtroom argument and frozen bank account dissolved into something that did not matter. "Grandpa, I lost a tooth," he said, pulling back and grinning to show the gap. "Which one?" "This one." He pointed. "The ferry gave me $5. "Inflation," I said. George would have laughed. Caroline stood by the car, hands in her coat pockets. She looked thinner. Her hair was shorter. She did not move toward the house until Sophie walked down the steps and took her arm. They came inside together. Caroline stopped in the doorway and looked at the ornament she had bought me 27 years ago, hanging in the window where the light touched it. "Merry Christmas, Dad," she whispered. "Merry Christmas, Caroline." We did not hug. We were not ready for that. But she sat at the table I had set for 4, and she ate the French toast Sophie made, and she watched her son tear open the wrapping on a red tractor with green wheels. Ethan drove it across the table, the counter, the floor, and the arm of the couch. The batteries lasted all day. After dinner, I walked to the cellar alone. The air was cold and still. I opened the 1997 reserve cabinet and placed my hand flat on the wood. "She came back, Eleanor," I said quietly. "We are not whole yet, but the pieces are in the same room." March came to Charlottesville the way it always does, slowly and then all at once. One morning the fields were brown and stiff with frost, and the next morning the redbuds along the fence line had exploded into pink like someone had set off fireworks in the tree line overnight. I stood at the edge of row 1 with my hands in my jacket pockets and watched the mist lift off the hills. The vines were still bare, but the buds had begun to swell at the nodes. I could see it if I looked closely, life pushing back against the cold. Frank arrived at 6:30 with 2 thermoses and a clipboard. He had spent the winter cataloging every row, every trellis post, every irrigation valve on the property, 80 acres documented in his careful handwriting, each page dated and initialed in the bottom corner. He handed me the clipboard without ceremony. 14 posts need replacing in the north block. Drip line in row 37 has a crack, and the cold room compressor is making a sound I do not like. I flipped through the pages. Every problem had a cost estimate beside it. Frank had called suppliers, compared prices, and circled his recommendations in red ink. He had done all of this without being asked. "What is the total?" I said. $11,800. Give or take. I did the math in my head. Derek's second repayment of $90,000 had arrived in February. On time, wired from a bank in North Carolina, where he had apparently found work at a commercial real estate firm. That brought the total repaid to $180,000, with $80,000 remaining. The vineyard operating account was healthy again. Not comfortable, but healthy. The way a farm account should be. "Order everything," I said. Frank nodded and walked toward his truck. Danny Torres showed up at 7 wearing the same boots he had worn since October. They were cracked along the sole and held together with something that looked like electrical tape. I did not say anything about the boots. I handed him a soil probe and told him we were testing every 5th row in the east block before noon. He took the probe and jogged ahead of me like a dog let off a leash. The boy had changed in 5 months. When he started in November, he asked permission before touching anything, moved carefully, kept his voice low. Now he moved through the vineyard like he belonged to it. He knew which rows drained fast and which held water. He could identify the Viognier from the Petit Mansung by the shape of the bud before a single leaf had opened. I had not taught him that. He had learned it on his own, Sitting in the cellar after hours, reading Eleanor's old viticulture books that I had forgotten were still on the shelf. By mid-March, we had hired 3 new workers to replace the 4 who had left during the restructuring. Maria Conti sent the first one, a quiet woman named Helen Daly, who had managed the kitchen garden at Monticello for 6 years before budget cuts eliminated her position. She arrived with her own gloves, her own pruning shears, and a knowledge of soil chemistry that impressed even Frank. The second was a college student named Marcus Webb, a viticulture major at Virginia Tech who needed field hours for his degree. He was eager and clumsy and reminded me of myself at 21. The third was a surprise. George Hadley drove up one Tuesday morning and parked his truck next to the equipment shed. He climbed out wearing work boots and a canvas jacket I had not seen in years. "What are you doing?" I said. "I am retired and bored, and my wife says I talk too much at breakfast. Give me something to do. I cannot pay you. I did not ask you to." He worked 3 days a week after that, mostly in the cellar, mostly organizing things that did not need organizing. But his presence filled a space I had not realized was empty. He told stories to Danny and Marcus while they sorted bottles. He argued with Frank about the proper way to repair a trellis wire. He brought sandwiches from his wife's kitchen every Thursday and left them in the break room without a note. The vineyard had not felt this alive in 2 years. In early April, I received a letter from Caroline. It was handwritten on plain white paper, no envelope decoration, no return address label. Just her name, in the upper left corner. She wrote that she had taken a part-time job at a nonprofit in Roanoke that helped families with financial literacy. She wrote that Ethan was doing well in school and had joined a soccer team. She wrote that she was seeing a counselor every 2 weeks and that it was harder than she expected, but she was not stopping. She did not ask for anything. She did not apologize again. She simply told me what she was doing, and that felt more honest than any apology she had offered before. I wrote back 3 sentences. "Thank you for telling me. I am glad Ethan is playing soccer. The vines are budding early this year." I mailed it the same afternoon. Sophie called that weekend and asked if she could bring Ethan for his spring visit. The custody agreement allowed 2 visits per month, but we had averaged 3 since January. Caroline never objected. She drove him to Sophie's apartment in Richmond each time without complaint, packed his bag with extra socks and a toothbrush and a note tucked inside that I pretended not to see. Ethan arrived on a Saturday morning in April with mud on his shoes and a school project about George Washington under his arm. He wanted to show me how grapes grow. I let him explain the entire process, from bud break to harvest, while we walked row 1 together. He got most of it right. When he made a mistake, I did not correct him. I just asked a question and let him find the answer on his own. Eleanor would have done the same. That night, after Ethan fell asleep on the couch with the red tractor still in his hand, I sat on the porch and listened to the frogs down by the creek. The air smelled like wet earth and new growth. Frank's repaired trellis posts stood straight and white in the moonlight. Somewhere in North Carolina, Derek Walsh was making payments on a debt he had earned. Somewhere in Roanoke, my daughter was learning to be honest. And here on this porch, on this land my family had worked for 73 years, the vines were waking up. I was not whole yet, but I was growing. The second Saturday of October arrived with a sky so blue it looked painted. I had been awake since 4, standing in the cellar checking the last case of the 2024 Reserve Viognier. 12 bottles, hand-labeled, each one carrying the taste of a year I would never forget. Frank had designed the label himself, a simple drawing of the vineyard at sunrise, with the words, "Prescott Vineyards, Charlottesville, Virginia, Est, 1,952 inches plain black type. No gold foil. No fancy script. Just the truth." By 8 o'clock, the field crew had transformed the South Meadow into something Eleanor would have loved. White tents lined the edge of the vine rows. Mason jar lanterns hung from wire, strung between the oak trees. Maria Conti had set up her food station near the stone wall. and the smell of roasted garlic and fresh bread drifted across the property like an invitation no one could refuse. Danny and Marcus carried folding chairs from the equipment shed, while Helen arranged wildflower bouquets on each table, using stems she had cut from the border garden at dawn. George arrived at 9 with his wife, Patricia, and a cooler full of sweet tea. He surveyed the meadow and shook his head slowly. "Eleanor is somewhere smiling right now," he said. "She is somewhere telling me the lanterns are crooked," I said. He laughed. It was the right kind of morning for laughing. By noon, the guests began to arrive. Not 50 this time. 73. Frank had kept the count because Frank kept count of everything. Neighbors from down the valley, families from town, restaurant owners who bought our wine, the pastor from the church on Barracks Road. Sam Yoder came with his wife and their newborn daughter, asleep in a carrier strapped to his chest. Patricia Nguyen arrived in a yellow dress and told me my books were the cleanest she had seen in 15 years of forensic accounting. I told her that was the nicest compliment anyone had ever given me. And I meant it. I moved through the crowd slowly, shaking hands, accepting plates of food I could not finish, answering questions about the harvest. The Viognier had come in at 23.4 bricks, which Frank said was the best sugar reading in a decade. The Petit Manseng was resting in oak barrels in the cellar, and I had decided not to touch it until spring. Some things need time. I was learning that lesson over and over. At 2:15, Sophie's car appeared on the gravel road. She parked near the old oak and stepped out, then opened the back door. Ethan jumped down wearing a white button-up shirt tucked into khaki pants that were already wrinkled at the knees. He spotted me across the meadow and waved with both hands over his head like he was guiding an airplane to land. Behind him, Caroline stepped out slowly. She was wearing a green dress and flat shoes, and she held a covered dish in both hands. She looked at the crowd and hesitated. Sophie put a hand on her sister's back, and they walked together toward the meadow. I watched them come. The guests noticed. A few conversations paused. Maria set down her serving spoon. Frank turned from the tent and stood very still. Caroline reached the edge of the first table and stopped. She looked at me across 15 feet of grass and said nothing. I walked to her. I took the dish from her hands. It was warm, potato salad. Eleanor's recipe. You remembered the dill, I said. I remembered everything, she said. I set the dish on the table and nodded toward the chairs. Find a seat. There is sweet tea in the cooler. It was not an embrace. It was not a speech. But it was an open door. And she walked through it. That was enough for now. The afternoon unfolded the way a festival should. Children ran between the vine rows playing games no adult could follow. Danny gave tours of the cellar, explaining the aging process with a confidence that made me proud and slightly nervous. Marcus poured wine samples at the tasting table and only spilled once. George told stories to anyone who would listen, and most people did. Maria sold out of her bruschetta by 3 o'clock and switched to serving emergency pasta from a pot she had somehow hidden behind the tent. At 4:30, when the light turned golden and the crowd had settled into that comfortable quiet that comes after good food and good wine, I found Ethan sitting on the stone wall near the cellar door. His shirt was untucked. His knees were grass-stained. He was holding a lantern jar up to the sun and watching the light pass through the glass. I sat down beside him. The stone was warm from the afternoon heat. Ethan, do you know what this vineyard means to our family? He lowered the jar and looked at me. It means grapes. I smiled. It means more than grapes. It means every person in our family, whoever put their hands in this soil and decided to stay. Your great-grandfather planted the first vine in 1952. Your grandmother kept it alive when no one thought she could. And now it is still here. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the small velvet box I had carried for over 3 years. I opened it. Inside was the Prescott family ring, gold, with the crest my father had designed. The metal was warm from sitting against my chest all afternoon. This ring belongs to the next person who will take care of this land. I am giving it to you. Not today. Not to wear now, but to keep. And when you are old enough to understand what it means, you will know what to do with it. Ethan took the box with both hands. He stared at the ring for a long time. Then he closed the box carefully, held it against his chest, and said, "I will not lose it, Grandpa. I know you will not." Caroline was standing 30 feet away. I had not seen her approach. Her hand was over her mouth, and her eyes were full. Sophie stood beside her, arm linked through her sister's elbow. Frank watched from the tent. George raised his glass of sweet tea from across the meadow. The sun dropped behind the Blue Ridge and the lanterns came alive. Small golden lights swaying in the October breeze. 73 people on my land, eating food made with love, drinking wine, grown from soil my family had tended for 73 years. 1 year ago, on a night exactly like this one, my daughter had taken a microphone and tried to take everything from me. Tonight she was sitting at my table, and my grandson was holding the future in his hands. November settled over the vineyard like a long exhale. The harvest was finished, the barrels were full, and the vines had dropped their leaves in neat piles along the rows as if they had decided together it was time to rest. I walked the property every morning the way I had for 43 years, but the walks felt different now. Lighter. Not because the weight was gone, but because I had learned to carry it without leaning. The festival had changed something in the valley. Neighbors who had kept their distance during the legal trouble began stopping by again. Tom Pearson from the smokehouse brought a case of apple butter and stayed for coffee. Linda Jeffries, who I had only known as an expert witness in a courtroom, came to buy 2 bottles of the Reserve Viognier and told me her daughter was getting married in the spring and she wanted Prescott wine at the reception. I sold her the bottles at cost and did not tell her why. The final payment from Derek Walsh arrived on November 14th. $80,000. Wired from the same North Carolina bank as the previous installments. $260,000. Repaid in full over 11 months. Sam Yoder called to confirm the transfer and told me the case file was officially closed. No further legal obligations on either side. The suspended sentences remained in effect for the full 3-year term. But as far as the courts were concerned, the financial matter was resolved. I sat at the kitchen table with the bank statement and stared at the number. $260,000. It had taken 18 months to steal and 11 months to return. The math was simple. The damage was not. Money can be counted and recovered. Trust cannot be deposited back into an account. It has to be rebuilt one small transaction at a time, and the interest rate is brutal. Frank retired on the last day of November. Not fully, not dramatically. He simply told me one morning that his knees had made a decision his brain was not willing to make, and that Danny Torres was ready. I argued with him for 11 minutes. He let me finish, then said, "I have been here 41 years, Mr. Prescott. Let me leave while I can still walk to my truck." We held a small dinner in the cellar that evening. 10 staff members, George and Patricia, Maria, and Sophie, who drove up from Richmond for the occasion. I opened a bottle of the 1997 Reserve that Eleanor and I had made together, the last vintage she touched before she got sick. The wine was 28 years old and still alive, dark fruit and cedar, and something underneath that I could never name but always recognized. It tasted like the past. Not bitter, not sweet, just real. I gave a short speech. I am not good at speeches. I told Frank that he had been the spine of this vineyard for 4 decades and that every bottle we had ever produced had his fingerprints on it, some of them literally. People laughed. Frank did not. He stood up and looked around the cellar at the barrels and the stone walls and the wooden racks and said, "This place raised me as much as I raised it." Then he sat down and finished his wine and did not say another word for the rest of the evening. Danny took over as vineyard manager the following Monday. He moved into the small cottage near the equipment shed that Frank had used as an office for 30 years. He repainted it on his first weekend. White walls, new shelves. A desk he built himself from reclaimed barnwood. He kept Frank's clipboard hanging on a nail by the door. I told him he could throw it away. He said he would rather not. December arrived quietly. Caroline called every Sunday now. The conversations were short. 5 minutes. Sometimes 8. She told me about her work at the nonprofit, about Ethan's soccer games, about the counselor she still visited every 2 weeks. I told her about the vineyard, about Danny's progress, about the winter pruning schedule. We talked the way two people talk when they are rebuilding a bridge from both sides and have not yet met in the middle. The words were careful. The silences were not empty. On the second Sunday of December, she said something that stopped me. "Dad." I read Mom's journal. I was standing at the kitchen window. The sky was gray. A cardinal sat on the fence post nearest the house, the only color in the landscape. "Which entry?" I said. "The one about the window. When I broke it with the soccer ball and lied about it for 3 days." I remembered. I had read that same entry the night before the first Christmas, almost exactly a year ago. She wrote that fear is not the same as dishonesty, Caroline said. Her voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled tight. I have been thinking about that for months. I was afraid, Dad. I was afraid of Derek, and afraid of losing what I thought I deserved, and afraid of telling you the truth. And the fear made me do things that were worse than dishonest. They were cruel. The cardinal flew away. The fence post stood bare. "I know," I said. "I am not asking you to forgive me today. I am just telling you that I understand now what I did and why it was wrong. Not because a judge told me, not because a lawyer explained it, because Mom told me from a journal she wrote 27 years ago." I closed my eyes. Eleanor's handwriting appeared in my mind, the careful loops, the slight forward lean of her letters, the way she always pressed harder on the first word of every sentence, as if she wanted to make sure it landed. "Your mother was smarter than both of us," I said. She really was. We stayed on the phone for another minute without speaking. It was the longest silence we had shared since the festival, and it was the most honest conversation we had ever had. On the first day of January, I woke before the sun. This was not unusual. I had been waking before the sun for 43 years, and my body no longer knew any other way. But this morning was different. The air had a stillness to it that felt deliberate, as if the world had paused to let me catch up. I made coffee in the kitchen. The mug with World's Okayest Winemaker sat on the shelf where it always sat, handle facing left, the way Eleanor used to place it. I poured the coffee and carried it to the porch. The sky was the color of pencil lead. No wind, no birds. Just the vineyard stretching out in every direction. 80 acres of bare vines, standing in their rows like soldiers at rest. I had decided to write a letter. Not to Caroline. Not to Sophie. Not to Ethan. To Eleanor. I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen that Frank had left behind in the cellar office. The pen was heavy, the kind that writes thick lines, and I pressed it against the paper and began. "Dear Eleanor, it has been 4 years since you left, and I still reach for your side of the bed every morning. I want to tell you what happened, not because you do not already know, but because I need to say it in my own words, in my own handwriting, the way you always said things mattered more when you could see the ink." I wrote for an hour. I told her about the first harvest festival, about Caroline's ultimatum, about Derek standing behind her with his arms crossed and his smile that I still saw in my sleep sometimes. I told her about the forged documents and the frozen accounts and the night I sat in George's kitchen and thought I had lost everything. I told her about Sam Yoder and his calm voice and his legal pad full of notes. About Linda Jeffries holding the power of attorney up to ultraviolet light and shaking her head. About Patricia Nguyen and her 34 red circles on a spreadsheet. I told her about Frank, who kept evidence in an envelope for months because he loved the vineyard more than he feared the consequences. About Maria, who rallied every restaurant in the valley because loyalty meant more to her than business. About George, who never once told me what to do, but was always standing in the exact place I needed him to be. I told her about the courtroom, About Judge Callahan's voice and the sound the gavel made when it struck the bench. About Derek's confession in the parking lot, recorded on a phone I almost forgot I was holding. About the plea agreement and the 6 conditions and the way Caroline's hand trembled when she signed her name. I told her about Christmas. About Sophie wearing her camel coat and Ethan running across the yard with his arms open. About the red tractor with green wheels that he drove across every surface in the house. About Caroline standing in the doorway looking at the brass binoculars ornament she had bought me 27 years ago. I told her about the ring. How I gave it to Ethan on the stone wall during the second festival. And how he held it against his chest and promised not to lose it. I told her his hands were small but steady. And that he closed the velvet box, the way someone closes a book they intend to read again. I told her about Frank's retirement dinner and the bottle of 1997 Reserve that tasted like cedar and dark fruit and thyme. About Danny Torres, who read her viticulture books in the cellar after hours and became the man the vineyard needed next. About Caroline's phone call in December, when she finally understood what Eleanor had written about fear and dishonesty, and how the longest silence between us became the truest thing we had ever shared. I filled 7 pages. My hand ached. The coffee was cold. The sun had come up without my noticing, and the kitchen was full of pale winter light. At the bottom of the 7th page I wrote, "You told me once that a vineyard is just a promise between the land and the person who tends it. You keep the soil honest, and the soil keeps you grounded. I broke that promise when I let someone else take the roots, but I came back. The vines came back. And our family, Eleanor, it is coming back too. Not the way it was. Maybe not the way we planned. But it is growing. And that is enough." I signed it the way I sign everything. James W. Prescott. Then underneath, in smaller letters, "Your husband. Still." I folded the letter and placed it inside Eleanor's journal. Between the last written page and the first blank one, she had left half the journal empty, as if she knew someone would need the space after she was gone. I closed the journal and set it on the shelf beside the photograph of us on our wedding day. She was 23 in that picture. I was 24. We were standing in front of the first row of vines my father had planted, and she was laughing at something I had said that I could no longer remember. It did not matter. The laughter was enough. That afternoon I put on my boots and walked row 1 from beginning to end. The soil was cold and firm beneath my feet. The trellis posts Frank had replaced in March stood straight and white. Danny had already pruned the first 20 rows, his cuts clean and precise, each one made at exactly the right angle. The boy had good hands. Eleanor would have said he had good instincts, which was her way of saying the same thing. I reached the end of the last row and turned around. The house stood at the top of the hill, smoke rising from the chimney, windows lit with the gold light of a winter afternoon. Behind it, the Blue Ridge Mountains stretched across the horizon like the spine of something ancient and patient. This was my land. This was my family's land. It had survived drought and frost and debt and betrayal, and it was still here, waiting for the next season, the next vine, the next hand, willing to do the work. I put my hands in my pockets and walked home.